Our word of the week this week isn't really a word, it is a concept. What do you do with a statement that is interjected into a biblical story by its author? So the setting is Jesus made a public declaration, and let's look at it in Mark chapter 7, verse 15. There is nothing outside a person that by going into him can defile him, but the things that come out of a person are what defile him. So after the crowd is gone, later in the day, his disciples come to him and ask what he meant by that. Why? Why would they be concerned with what he meant by that? Why don't they understand it? Because they are all Jewish young men who've been raised kosher, presumably, and they all have been raised with a very clear sense that some things, by eating or even by contact with, are defiling, that they make you ritually unclean and you have to go through a cleansing period and process before you can reapproach God and reapproach the community if you've been so defiled. So let's look at what he says next in response to them. And this is Mark 7, verses 18 through 20. And he said to them, "Then are you also without understanding? Do you not see that whatever goes into a person from outside cannot defile him, since it enters not his heart but his stomach and is expelled? Thus he declared all foods clean. And he said, what comes out of a person is what defiles him." Right after this, he lists a bunch of defiling things like sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, coveting, wickedness, deceit, sensuality, envy, slander, pride, and foolishness. But our issue is that parenthetical statement at the end of verse 19. Let's take a look. Since it enters not his heart but his stomach and is expelled, thus he declared all foods clean. And the parenthetical here is katharidzon panta to bromata. So katharidzon is a participle, cleansing, panta all, ta bromata the foods. Cleansing all the foods. So here we have a parenthetical comment by Mark the author. And parenthetical, our English word parenthetical, comes from parentetheni, and it means to put in alongside. So this is a statement about what Jesus said. This is not a part of Jesus' statement. That's what we're acknowledging here. So first question that we have to wrestle with is, did Mark write this or was it added later? Did Mark write this or was it added later? So when we look at textual variants, there are no variants that omit this. So from the earliest copies of Mark, this little phrase, katharidzon panta to bromata, is in the text. And the variants that do exist change the participle into an indicative verb. So instead of cleansing all the foods, it becomes he cleansed all the foods. Almost certainly this is original content because there's no variant that omits it, right? From the earliest days, it's included in there. Here's one thing to note. The King James Version doesn't treat it like a parenthetical. It treats it as though it's a part of what Jesus said. So you would have to read that as the things that enter into a person don't defile them because they pass through and get expelled, cleansing all the foods. And I'm not certain if that makes sense or not. That's up to you to wrestle with. But if you accept it as a parenthetical comment by Mark, the question is a comment by the biblical author authoritative? Like, are we to accept that because Mark said that he interprets it that way, that Jesus was in fact declaring all foods clean in that comment? So within the context, the question is the point about food or about the things that actually make people unclean or defiled? Is Jesus dismissing dietary law to a Jewish audience, his disciples, prior to the cross? Imagine that for a moment. Before going to the cross, before satisfying all the requirements of the law? Is Jesus telling his disciples that law doesn't matter? It's unlikely, in my opinion, that that's what he's doing. Or, subsequently, is Mark importing a post-cross, post-resurrection understanding of Jesus into the writing of this gospel and sort of imputing this notion into what Jesus is telling his disciples? The challenge here isn't really which one of these is correct. The challenge is, do you have a position on how you will wrestle with these kind of parenthetical comments? If not, you're at risk of one of two things, at least one of two things. At first, you could be at risk of engaging in superstition. What do I mean by that? If you approach it and say, anything that managed to get into the book must be straight out of the lips of God. God grabbed Mark by the back of the head and took his other hand and grabbed his writing hand, and God made Mark put that phrase in there so that everyone would know, even though it's prior to the cross, that the dietary laws of Leviticus are eradicated. Okay, that's a possibility, but I think that sounds a little superstitious in the sense that for the law to be satisfied, Christ has to go to the cross, and he's not yet gone to the cross, right? For it to be fulfilled and reach its telos, Christ has to go to the cross, and he hasn't done that at that point. What's the second issue? You may be at risk of being someone who outright dismisses the entirety of the text because you say, if a writer could insert his opinion here, then I should set all of it aside because I'm not interested in people's opinions. I'm interested in authoritative, doctrine-growing text that's inspired. Somewhere in the middle there, we have to wrestle with what inspiration means. Are the writers God's pen that God is writing, or are they God's penmen who, as they were moved by the Holy Spirit, wrote as they understood and believed they should write, and maybe even in that process may once in a while say, as I understand what happened here, it looks to me like Jesus was saying, you don't have to keep kosher. He's declaring all foods clean, or he's cleansing all the foods by virtue of saying real defilement starts inside and not outside. Wherever you land, I just hope that you have a position on how you'll wrestle with this, and that you'll take a good look at issues like inspiration and whether or not the writers are God's pen or his penmen, and what you will do to avoid disregarding the authority of the text as well as becoming superstitious and thinking that every punctuation mark has to have been a divine stroke of the pen. Wherever you land, I hope this was valuable to you, beneficial. I hope you'll like, share, subscribe, tell your friends, leave me some feedback in the comments, let me know what you think. And until next time, Charis Kai Reine Humin, grace and peace to you.